What's going on, everyone? Travis Brown with Eagle, here with Robert Cessna of the Eagle, also Alex Miller of the Eagle. We're looking forward to the big Southeastern Classic. I don't know why Southwestern Classic. What am I talking about?
Southwest.
I'm here over here at baseball. It's fall baseball season. I'm mixed, but it is the Southwest Classic, A&M versus Arkansas. We have our special guest, the man, the legend, Bob Holt, on here with us. Bob, how's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, they ought to call it. They used to be in the Southwest Conference Classic, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's start off with Bob. What from an Arkansas standpoint, what are some of the key storylines and the things you're looking out for leading up to this big game this weekend at AT&T Stadium?
Well, just kind of can Arkansas keep it going? They're off to this 3-0 start. It's pretty amazing if you remember what Arkansas was like a couple of years ago. I mean, they obviously made progress last year under Sam Pittman, winning 3 SEC games and having a chance to win. Really, were robbed of the Auburn game, honestly, and could have won a couple more. And so they're obviously getting better, but I don't think anybody in their right mind thought Arkansas would be ranked. A couple of years ago, I mean, they were really one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country. And so it really speaks to what this coaching staff has done, what Sam Pittman and his assistants have done. And honestly, it also shows that while Arkansas was not Alabama, they weren't devoid of talent either. Honestly, the previous staff just wasn't getting the most out of those guys. But yeah, the big question is, they had a huge win over Texas here. Can they keep it going? Can they do it away from Fayetteville? Because they're 3-0 all in Fayetteville and having big crowds back, big crowd for Texas. So it was really into that game. And so are they ready for this challenge? Are they ready to try to beat him for the first time in 10 years?
Hey, Bob, I'm interested. I read a lot about Texas, and I knew how important a game that is, going way back, 69, whatever. So I knew Arkansas would be really up. That would be such a big win for them. How do they view A&M? Because, they're back playing A&M. Like you mentioned, they've lost 9 in a row. How does, beat A&M, or where does that stand on the totem pole compared to beating Texas?
Well, they just hate Texas. I don't think beat any. I mean, it depends on who you ask. They'd probably rather beat Texas than Alabama. Now, obviously, some of the younger kids and guys the age of these players, they don't really remember the Texas rivalry from the Southwest Conference. But if you're of a certain age, like over 40, Texas is, they probably want to beat Texas as bad as A&M wants to beat Texas. If they still play. And so that was a huge deal. And it really was a statement, it was on ESPN prime time. And, Arkansas got to show off their stadium. They had a ton of recruits in. It was just a really big win on a lot of levels. But A&M, I mean, it's an old Southwest Conference rival. It's a team that, it's been a good series. But honestly, before this recent A&M run, Arkansas had dominated the series, at the end of the Southwest Conference days when Frank Broyles, first got Arkansas really going in the late 50s and the 60s. And then by Petrino, his last 3 years, they played A&M and beat them every year, had some crazy comebacks. And so, Arkansas is definitely sick of losing to Texas A&M. And I'm sure Jerry Jones is really tired of having that trophy over to the Aggies. I know he respects A&M, but it's got to be killing him that his Razorbacks have lost 9 in a row in his stadium, and he so badly wanted this series in his stadium.
Kind of going off of Cease's question, I'm a little too young to remember the days of Arkansas playing A&M and Texas in the same year, but it's kind of not common anymore that they play them in the same season. But what would it mean for the Razorbacks to beat both the Longhorns and the Aggies in the same season?
Well, it'd be huge because, one, they're both really good. I mean, Texas, you can say what you like, they're ranked 15th. Wouldn't be surprised to see them get back in the rankings. They're obviously a quality program. They haven't been what they once were, but it's Texas, and A&M is Jimbo's really got them going. They won 12 in a row. I think that's the longest winning streak since 92. And, it would be huge because, first of all, you're talking about beating 2 ranked teams, and also Arkansas, recruits in Texas. They don't sign as many players, obviously, from Texas as Texas and A&M do, or Oklahoma probably. But, Texas is very important to Arkansas going back to Frank Broyles' days. And so it would really be, it would mean a lot just to be two really good programs, but also for recruiting, I think it would really be big for Arkansas.
A lot being said of KJ Jefferson, the quarterback, and what he's been able to bring, but also a lot about the physicality of Arkansas's offense, which is usually a staple of that team. Would you say that the strength of this offense is the run game? Is it the pass game? Is it the balance between the two? How would you kind of define what KJ Jefferson and this offense has been able to do so far this season?
Yeah, it's definitely been the running game. I mean, they just honestly ran the ball down Texas's throat. And what you really got from that game was Texas doesn't have the linemen to compete consistently in the SEC right now. I think if Texas was an SEC, let's say Texas had to play Arkansas' schedule, and of course Arkansas has the, I guess you can call it the good fortune or the misfortune. They play Georgia. They don't get to play Vanderbilt or South Carolina. They're playing Georgia. At least they don't have to play Florida. They got to play all those West teams. And obviously they, and they're getting A&M in a neutral site after having to go to College Station. But I think if Texas had to play Arkansas' schedule, and would lose to Arkansas, I think Texas would go 6-6 or 7-5. They're just not ready to challenge physically in this league. Arkansas just blew them off the ball. Ran for 333 yards. What really impressed me was Texas scored early in the fourth quarter, about 13 minutes left, cut it to, I think it was 33-19. So, it's still a game. And, Arkansas wants to run the ball. They want to run clock. Arkansas went 75 yards in 8 plays, never passed, gave the ball to 2 freshman running backs, and Texas couldn't stop. Everybody in the stadium knew they were going to run the ball, and they just kept plowing Texas. So, and KJ Jefferson, a much better runner than Felipe Franks. Now, Felipe Franks, he's on an NFL roster. He's got a big time arm. And KJ Jefferson's got a strong arm, but sometimes you don't know where the ball's going. I don't mean that as a knock on a kid. He's a heck of an athlete. And, he's just a redshirt sophomore. This is his first time to be the starter. He started a couple games, played well at Missouri last year, got thrown to the fire at LSU as a freshman. And he's got a big time arm, but he can really run the ball. He's physical. I mean, I don't exactly know what he weighs. He told us in camp he weighed 245 and he wanted to lose some weight, and then he was down to 237. I don't know if it's a mistake, but Sam Pittman on his radio show the last couple of weeks has called him 255. I don't think he's quite that big, but he's a load. And I can just imagine being a cornerback. If you see KJ Jefferson coming around that end and he's got a head of steam built up, I wouldn't want to be trying to tackle him. So, but yeah, definitely the run, and they've got a really good stable of running backs. Traylon Smith, their junior from Houston's the number 1 guy, but these freshmen, Rocket Sanders and AJ Green and Dominic Johnson, a sophomore, has been really, really good. They've got a really good group of running backs, and they're not afraid to use all of them.
Bob, that same line is, what's the health of that Arkansas team? Saw a lot of reports that maybe they could be missing 1 or 2 linemen. And I know A&M's had some injury problems which hurt them last week. What is the health of that physicality that Arkansas has been able to show everybody else?
Well, yeah, it's up in the air really what their offensive line is going to look like Saturday. And I'm sure Sam Pittman, like a lot of coaches, is not going to tell you here's who's starting. And he may not know till Friday or something, but they had 2 starters. Their center, Ricky Stromberg, who's really, really good. He's one of the best centers in the country, I think. And Dalton Wagner, right tackle, 5th-year guy, very good player, big guy. I mean, and they both had to leave the Georgia Southern game because of injuries, and they had to reshuffle the line. And Sam Pittman's, they did not practice Monday. And he said, he doesn't know. He said they're basically preparing as if those guys won't be able to play. Now, he didn't rule them out. I'd have to say they're questionable, and we'll probably have to wait till pregame warm-ups to know if those guys are dressed out or going with first team. But they do have some depth. They've done a pretty good job of multitasking guys in camp, getting them ready. Sam Pittman's an old offensive line coach, and he said, on Saturday mornings they meet, and maybe for an afternoon game, maybe they do it at night, or Friday night. But he said they basically know 5 deep who's going. Like if something happens to the left tackle, here's what we're going to do. If something happens to the center, here's what we're going to do. And they know about 5 deep. So, they'll have a plan ready, and it probably helps them that the group they ended the game with, or before they started substituting late in the game, that group will probably get to work together this week, and so you figure there'd be more cohesiveness for the game if that's how it turns out to be.
What about on defense? Jimbo mentioned about when you look at such a veteran defense, and of course they return so many starters, how much better is this defense than it was last year? Because A&M put a lot of points up on, that was a high scoring game last year. Of course it was down here. How improved is that defense?
Yeah, they're a lot better. Like you said, they got a lot of guys back, but they added 3 defensive linemen in the transfer portal, 2 of them from Missouri, and Barry Odom, the Arkansas defense coordinator, was the head coach at Missouri and the defensive coordinator. They got Markel Utze, who's from Little Rock, but he went to Missouri. He's a 5th-year guy. And no, actually, he's a 6th-year guy. I guess they call them super seniors. And they got Trey Williams, who's a 5th-year guy. And they've got a guy, John Ridgway, who's from Illinois State. You might say, well, Illinois State, I mean, that's the Missouri Valley team. But he admittedly said he basically didn't do well. He kind of didn't care about academics in high school, limited options. He stayed from Bloomington, Illinois, stayed home and went to Illinois State. And he's a grad trainer. When he were in the portal, Texas wanted him, USC, Michigan. I mean, he was heavily coveted. And he's huge. He's 6'6", 320. And he missed the Rice game because he had appendectomy like a week before. And then he's out there against Texas coming off the bench. He had 6 tackles, which we know is a lot for a defensive tackle. He sacked Hudson Card. He's a mammoth in there. So yeah, those 3 guys, that's their starters. If they go 3-man, they can go 4-man. So they're more versatile there. You might see them in 6 DBs, 5 DBs. They got 3 really good linebackers. I mean, I know Jimbo said the other day, 2 of those guys, it's really 3. Grant Morgan, Bumper Pool, who's a Texas kid, and Hayden Henry, if people remember Hunter Henry, the great Arkansas tight end who's with New England now, that's his brother. And one of the other Hudson brothers is a tight end, or Hudson Henry is a tight end. And their dad played here in the 80s. He was an all-SWC center against the Aggies, and played against the Aggies. But yeah, Arkansas's defense, they had a lot of guys back, and they added some really key experienced linemen that they really can rotate 7-8 guys in there and stay fresh. And you know, that's a big deal.
Bob, what about this game? It looks like if it gets down to a field goal, maybe we'll talk about special teams, but what about giving up the home field advantage? I mean, if this game was in Arkansas after what they did to Texas, I think it might be, the home field advantage might be worth 5 to 6 points if they're playing in Fayetteville. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Sam Pittman didn't make any secret of the fact that he would prefer to play this game in Fayetteville, you know, especially after Arkansas had to go to College Station last year. And of course, they were supposed to play in Arlington, but because of COVID, you know, as far as I know, there were not games in pro stadiums. I honestly don't remember what Texas, I guess Texas, no, you played in the Cotton Bowl, but that's not an NFL stadium. But like Missouri, Arkansas was supposed to play Missouri and Kansas City last year in Arrowhead, and that was Missouri's choice. They moved a couple Arkansas games, home games from Missouri to Kansas City to sort of appease the fans in that area, since they're not playing Kansas and Kansas State anymore, because obviously they left the Big 12. But that game got moved to Columbia, and then it'll get played in Fayetteville this year. But, you know, there's a contract, and A&M's relationship with Jerry Jones is different than Arkansas's relationship with Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones has given millions and millions of dollars to the University of Arkansas. I mean, they've got a wonderful place where, you know, they have the training table and counseling and academics. It's, I don't know, $12 million building or something. Jerry donated that. If you come to the stadium here, they've got this incredible wild hog statue. It's not a statue. It's, I don't know what, it's a bunch of wild hogs in a fountain. It looks like something you'd see in Rome or something. And Jerry, I think that was like $3 million. Jerry, that's Jerry's deal. And it, you know, people really love it. It's a neat gathering place to take photos and stuff. And Jerry's given, when they renovated the stadium back in the early 2000s, I know Jerry gave a lot of money for that. And, you know, and Jerry, I mean, he's a businessman. We know, you know, he's made more money than God or whatever, or close to that. But he also, it means a lot to him when he built that stadium, and it's still a great stadium, however old it is. To me, every time I go in there, it's like it's brand new. I mean, you don't see a wrapper on the floor or anything, man. I mean, somebody drops a wrapper, somebody's there to grab for it, hits the floor. But it was really important for Jerry, I think, to get this game there. And of course, when it was a non-conference game, it was different. But, you know, the Aggies joined the league. But if Arkansas moved this game to Fayetteville this year, which they could have, that means the contract would have rolled over to 2025. And so now I think both teams honestly want it on campus. And so when it's done in 2024, I know A&M wants it on campus. Hunter Yurchek's basically, Arkansas AD said Arkansas wants it on campus. But there is a contract to fulfill, and both teams make a lot of money. I think both teams make about $5 million off this every year. It's not like you make $5 million when it's your home game and the other guys make $5 million. No, they both make $5 million every year. So there's an economic component to it too. So, but yeah, it's a neutral site. Obviously, in Arkansas, I'd rather have this game. And I don't know, what's the line, like 6 points or something for A&M?
5.5.
5.5, 6. Which betting
I
site?
I think if this game was in Fayetteville, it'd probably be a pick'em game. Maybe Arkansas would be favored by a point or two, maybe A&M by a point or two. But yeah, there's no doubt. I think it helps A&M to get to play in Arlington rather than Fayetteville. But that's just the way it is.
Between Cease and Bob, going back in history, when is the last time that y'all can remember an Arkansas game that was this, this maybe anticipated and had this much effect on the top 25? And maybe just go back between the two of you, some of y'all's favorite A&M and Arkansas memories through the years.
You mean this is the biggest Arkansas A&M game since?
Yeah.
Since when? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's the first time been ranked 5 years. You go back to it, Bob hit on it. Arkansas owned the series there for a while. It wasn't like, A&M was doing well. And then A&M always was focused on beating Texas, just like Bob said. And I always remember when A&M thought they beat them out here. I forget what year it was, with Hatfield and the official, one of the refs that made the call lived in Arkansas or something. And there was a big controversy over that. But, there's been a few A&M Arkansas games, but it's like, it's hilarious when they said to go back in the conference to be old rivals. Well, everybody in the Southwest Conference was together, but, A&M was so focused on Texas and they weren't having a lot of success about Arkansas. So I don't think they looked forward to Arkansas. And of course, the year with A&M was it 75 or whatever, went up there, Arkansas #2 in the country. And oh my gosh, that was just, falling apart 33-6 or whatever. And, it's not been a lot of good memories for A&M when you look at A&M Arkansas.
Yeah, that was before my time covering the beat, but I remember that game. Yeah, A&M was #2 and had that big running back, big
George Woodard.
Yeah, George Woodard. And Arkansas took it to him in Little Rock, and there was like a 3-way tie for the South Conference title. That was Frank Burrell's next to last year. He took him to the Cotton Bowl, and they beat Georgia like 31-10. And so yeah, that was a great win for Arkansas. And you see that. I guess I remember the game when who was the Packers coach that coached the Aggies? I'm having a brain break.
Mike Sherman.
Yeah, Mike Sherman. I was a Packers fan, so I knew about him. I just couldn't remember his name. But I remember they had a big lead on Arkansas at halftime. And I remember I was I'm not gonna say who it was. Somebody from A&M. I saw in the press box and I said, "Boy, the Aggies look good." And I think like A&M that year blowing some big halftime leads. And they just kind of went like, I don't know. And then Arkansas had this huge comeback, and Tyler Wilson threw for like 500 something yards, whatever it was a school record. And Petrino, you can say what you like about him, but he can X and O with the best of them. And he never lost A&M. He was 3-0 against them. I remember that game. I remember. And that game that you were talking about that was in Aggie land and Arkansas won. Yeah, controversial. Was it a pass interference call?
Pass interference call.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And Arkansas pulled it out, and that was Jackie Sherrill's good teams and Ken Hatfield's good teams. Arkansas pulled that out. Quinn Grovey was the quarterback. And I remember my first year on the beat in '81, Arkansas going down to Aggie land, winning 10-7, just a real tough, grinded out. I think Gary Kubiak was the quarterback, and Billy Ray Smith was playing for Arkansas. A couple of good NFL guys, how
about more recent Johnny Manziel's first year when Arkansas had coaching problems, came down here in 2012. And just unbelievable. What was that score? Like 60 some to whatever. And that was
59-10.
It was bad. I remember we flew into Houston and drove down to College Station. I guess probably like a lot of people do. And we were driving back after the game. And I remember telling, it was me and Wally Hall and Tom Murphy, our gang. And I said,
Wow.
I used to be of the philosophy that you can't vote a freshman for the Heisman Trophy. I said, if that guy keeps playing like that, he's getting my Heisman vote. And of course, he got, a lot of people's Heisman votes because he won the Heisman. But yeah, that's when, and I remember Kevin Sumlin wouldn't let him do interviews. I remember, normally I would do an Arkansas sidebar, but Arkansas was so terrible and Manziel was so great. I said, God, please let me go to A&M's presser, so I don't have to go listen to Arkansas, BS about this. And I remember it was kind of like a theater or something. We were in theater seats, or I guess it was a meeting.
Correct. Yeah.
And I remember, I think everybody was begging, like, can we get Manziel in here? And I don't think he came in. I guess it went until later. And but yeah, that was just such just a total beatdown. It was that's when Petrino had been fired and John L. Smith was the interim coach. It was just a total beatdown. And the next year was a little more competitive. Well, actually, a lot more competitive in Fayetteville. Manziel played well again, and A&M won, but that game was at least kind of fun and competitive, But
Well,
I guess
what I remember
about the recent games is just how many times Arkansas was in position to win and couldn't close the game out, whether it was a missed field goal or crazy penalty or
The tripping call.
Kicking the ball to Kirk. I remember thinking, why did they do that? When he ran it back, Christian Kirk, and A&M would find a way to win, Arkansas would find a way to lose. I mean, you just think, like some of those 2 or 3 overtime losses, and Arkansas must have had double-digit leads in 5 or 6 of those games, and so you just feel like Arkansas, should have won its share of those games. And not only did they not win their share, they didn't win any of them. They haven't won any of them. So that's kind of what I remember of recent vintage, is just A&M doing whatever it takes to win, and Arkansas just finding a way to lose.
You look at Mon's long not touchdown run. He got down to where they could score, and you hit on it, Bob. What's funny is, and A&M doesn't even like to talk about their good times against Arkansas during this stretch because it involved Kevin Sumlin. And that was really only Kevin Sumlin's good point, along with beating Tennessee when they were in the top 10 in their close wins over Arkansas to get Bielema fired. So A&M doesn't even like to talk about that recent success because you got to mention Sumlin.
Well, I guess that's an A&M thing, but yeah, you got to figure out at some point, you figure Arkansas's got to break through and win. But, now that Jimbo's come in, he's really taken A&M to another level. I mean, the recruiting, and you feel like as long as Jimbo's there, they're going to be a top 10 team.
Hey, Bob, I got to ask, I was reading the transcript. I haven't watched the deal from last night. I was too busy, but what's this about Pittman that maybe Jimbo was going to offer him a job as O-line coach? What about that? Is that true, or what's the deal?
I don't know. What I had it in my head, and maybe Jimbo mentioned it or something. I Googled it and I couldn't find anything like Jimbo Fisher offers Sam Pittman, but I just had it in my head that Jimbo had offered him a job, or at least talked to him about coming to A&M when Jimbo went to A&M. Because Sam, when Sam was with Tennessee and got fired, when Derek Dooley got fired, and Brett scooped him up, and Jim Chaney, their offensive coordinator, and then Sam got like an immediate, raise because we heard Saban tried to hire him, and then not Jimbo, Kirby, getting my Saban assistants mixed up here. Kirby Smart hired him at Georgia. And that's really when things started falling apart for Brett. I mean, losing Sam was huge. That's why I thought Sam was a pretty good hire for head coach. Part of the reason was people weren't beating down the door to get the job, and he really wanted it, which I thought was important. And then also I knew how good he'd recruited, how good a recruiter he was, and that things really fell apart at Arkansas when Sam left. That was a huge tipping point. And so I don't remember exactly where I heard it or read it or whatever, but I had it in my head that Jimbo tried to hire him, or at least talk to him. So I thought, well, what it is. We don't get these guys every day like we did 30 years ago. And you don't get to get a guy off to the side,
Right.
Like you used to. So sometimes you just got to ask something in front of a bunch of people. And so I think I just said, hey, did he try to hire you? I got that right. And Sam kind of paused. And, we know if somebody tries to hire you, you generally know if somebody tries to hire you. And so Sam could have said, well, no, I love Jimbo, but no, he never talked to me about a job or whatever. But he had this long pause, and then he kind of gave this, odd answer like, well, I really don't know. And it's like, well, what do you mean? You don't know? No, I'm not going to tell you about it. So maybe we'll have to ask Jimbo about it on the teleconference. But do you guys remember anything like? I had it in my head.
No,
that-
I didn't.
Uh-huh.
It makes sense though, because he kept. A lot of people wonder why he kept Jim Turner before he went to Cincinnati. So that would make sense because Turner and Price were the only guys he kept. So that does make sense. And he had problems with the O-line coach at Florida State. That's one of the reasons why he started losing. So when I read that, I go, that makes sense. He'd go after Sam Pittman.
Well, Sam certainly did not shoot it down. He didn't confirm it exactly, but he certainly didn't deny it. And of course, we also heard Sam hired Brad Davis, who had been Barry Odom's O-line coach at Mizzou, and he'd been at Florida. So Sam and he'd played at OU for Sam when Sam was OU's O-line. Well, Sam's been the O-line coach for like all over the place. And he's never, won for a job. Somebody always wants to hire Sam Pittman. And so we heard that A&M tried to hire Davis because he, again, shortly after he got hired at Arkansas, he got a nice little bump in salary. We heard the Aggies tried to hire him. And then LSU did hire him this past summer. He's from Baton Rouge, and LSU, he was getting good money here at Arkansas. I think he was getting $600,000 some. LSU offered him a 3-year deal with over $800,000. Like, it goes from like, I don't know, 820 to 840, 860. And it's a 3-year deal. And he's guaranteed like $2.5 million.
Wow.
No offense to Brad Davis. He's a fine coach, but O-line coaches are making what head coaches used to make not so long ago. And so, yeah, I guess Jimbo's got this history of either trying to hire Sam or trying to raise his staff, which that's a compliment. If you got, Frank Burrows always said, you don't want to have coaches that nobody else wants, but if they're good, you want to keep them, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Well, real quick before we go, let's wheel it around. Is this the year that Arkansas ends the streak? I'm actually thinking that it might be. Bob, do you have any ideas of what you feel on this game yet?
I don't really, being a beat writer, I don't really like to pick a score, but it's funny. We do, and Tom Murphy does a great job. We call them helmets. He does on Saturdays, and he kind of breaks down the positions, like who has the edge at quarterback, who has the edge at running back, down the line. And I remember thinking, man, there's a lot of things that I think are pretty even here. And some of it depends on the injuries, but I started thinking about quarterback, and I'd probably have to give that edge to KJ Jefferson just because he runs the ball well and he's got a little bit more experience. And running backs, I mean, the Aggies have two of the best running backs around, but Arkansas's got like the stable of guys. Then you look at wide receivers, and of course, A&M's got a clear advantage at tight end, but I think it's pretty even. I mean, it's I never thought I'd be saying that a couple of years ago, that Arkansas would be, able to, go toe to toe with A&M physically. And last year, you could really tell physically A&M just dominated the line of scrimmage. They had a better O-line, they had a better D-line, and they still got a really good defensive line. If their O-line's younger, Arkansas's got all these like 6th and 5th year guys, but some of that is if Wagner and Stromberg can play. But yeah, I think Arkansas's got a real shot to end the streak. I'd have to pick A&M on a neutral field probably, but boy, Arkansas, I think, matches up pretty well with them.
Cease, do you have a feel for this one yet?
Yeah, I just think Bob hit on a lot of things. I just don't know how good A&M is. That includes the defense. Played 3 cream puffs, and I think A&M's defense is good, but they have played absolutely no one. This is their first big test. Arkansas has a win over Texas to me, which gives them something, but A&M, you got to give them the nod just because they've been there. We know they've got 4 All-Americans. Bob's right. Health could determine this. If Robinson doesn't play for A&M or Anaya Smith, or let's say 2 offensive linemen for Arkansas don't play when they've run the ball well, they're not going to run the ball as well with their backups. I think this is a 1-score game going in because there's so many unknowns. Even though we're at week 4, I think it's huge that A&M's not going to Arkansas. If you're going to Arkansas, I would think, man, A&M's maybe in a little bit of trouble, because just going in there and see what Texas did, they didn't even have a chance. Bottom line is, I'm looking forward to this game because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think A&M's questions on the offensive line, they haven't necessarily proven themselves yet. And this is just like Jimbo said, they didn't play physical, and Arkansas is a physical team. So yeah, this could definitely be that year that this is the year to break the streak. Alex, real quick, what do you got?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a classic A&M Arkansas game like that we've seen the last 10 years. Arkansas probably will have their chances, but we'll see if the Aggies can make it 10 in a row. That'd be pretty impressive, considering the series history. And I mean, beating a team 10 times is probably pretty dang hard. So,
Yeah.
I go ahead, Travis.
Oh, I was just going to wrap it up.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Bob, real quick, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, where can they find your work leading up to the game?
Well, ArkansasOnline.com. We also have a Northwest edition, so that's NWA.com. And then we have a website that's basically devoted to all things Razorback, which is WholeHogSports.com. And then, my Twitter, it's kind of like your own phone number. I'm trying to remember my Twitters. I think it's Bob Holt at ADG or at Bob Holt ADG, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. But yeah, if you Google me on Twitter, I think it'll show up at Bob Holt ADG on Twitter.
There it is, the great.
You got to follow Bob, Murphy, and Hall. Those are three legends of the game. They've been up at Arkansas forever. They know what's going on. Respect all three of those guys.
Of course. Yeah. Well, Bob, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening or watching. And we'll be back next week for more of the Zoom Hangouts and the My Aggie Nation podcast.